wasn't too sure how I wanted to start this video because it is certainly a tough one and one I never wanted to make, but I know I want it to be a positive one and I don't want to be blubbering and crying. I have done that enough over the past few months and I really don't want to bring that to this video. But I guess where I'll start off is, if you didn't know, Gizmo, my eldest leopard gecko, my first ever reptile, sadly passed away at the grand age of 18. I made a video back in August about the fact that she'd recently not been quite herself, we'd had to take her to the vets, and pretty much they couldn't do any more tests on her. Whether they want to do a blood test, sonogram, another x-ray or anything, she would have to have anaesthetic, and she already did not react well to that, so she probably wouldn't have made it through the tests. So they kind of just concluded it could be a tumour, it could be heart failure, but they didn't know. To be honest, they were basing that on nothing. There was no evidence for either of them. But what I think what it was is they were saying to me, look, there's nothing we can do here. This isn't something we're going to fix with medicine. And I knew deep down in my heart that was probably the case. I think she was just very old and things were slowing down and maybe not functioning as well as they should. She still ate. I mean, granted, not as much as a gecko normally would, but she would still eat, she would still poop and shed and have a little gecko routine. Like, you would know where she would be in her tank by the time you go into the reptile room. Like, I knew she would be by her water at this time, and she's moved from her warm hide to her cold hide at this time. But it was obvious that things were coming to a head because she was very old, and in some ways this allowed me to mourn quite a bit before the inevitable happened. I think I went through the 5 stages of grief multiple times, including denial. There were a few times I thought, maybe this is just something she's fighting off and she'll come back. Like, how can she be sick? She's still, like, actively hunting down food. Anyway, this actually is something I wanted to talk about as well. When I first got into keeping leopard geckos, it was always said that leopard geckos can live 20 years or more, but usually males are the ones that live longer compared to females. And now when I Google it, it says they live 10 to 20 years or 15 to 20 years. So in that respect, Gizmo did really well. I know some people will say female leopard geckos only live 9 years. She doubled that. So we've got to look at the positives here. I'd also like to quote Paul O'Grady. He's a bit of a national treasure here in the UK. And he said, "Taking any animal into your life will inevitably end in heartache. But you don't worry about the hangover when you're at the party. When you have a pet, you know this is inevitable, and you always hope that you will have a pet that will live a long, happy and healthy life." So I kind of want to give 13-year-old me a pat on the back, because you did it. You did a good job, and she lived her full, long life. We were very fortunate that the only time Gizmo needed to see a vet was this year. She had never been ill before, so she never had to see the vet. She always had such a great appetite, she was active, entertaining, and I'd like to focus on that. So I got Gizmo back in 2006. Prior to this, I wanted a leopard gecko for 3 years. Now, as a kid, 3 years is a long time, but I saved up all my pennies and I did a load of research. So yes, in some ways, I've been researching leopard geckos for like 2 decades now. But when I found a breeder and she showed me the babies she had and she said, "Which one would you like?" I looked down and this gecko just gave me this look, which Gizmo has done multiple times since, and I was like, that's the one. That is the one for me. I also knew that I was going to call my first gecko Gizmo after Gizmo from the film Gremlins. Also, it's a unisex name, so it would work either way. Once I put down my deposit, I would get updates from the breeder every Friday with a new photo of Gizmo and a new weight, because I had to wait until she was 11 grams before she could come home with me. And every week I would print out these little pictures and stick them in my school logbook, where you'd like write down, you know, your homework and your lesson planner, and you'd have this page that you can customise yourself, and I actually still have that logbook now with those images in. And when I was in year 9, I remember in English class we had to do a presentation about something we were passionate about, and at that time I had just got Gizmo, and I took my presentation to school on a floppy disk, which is kind of showing my age, but they were on the way out at that point. And yeah, I remember like telling all my classmates about leopard geckos in general and what Gizmo was like, and the fact that very soon we're going to find out if she's a boy or a girl. And yeah, I think from the second I put that deposit down, I was utterly obsessed with Gizmo. And I mean, I have 18 years worth of whatever I've fed her. Like, I've noted that down for 18 years, and for some reason I've never thrown the paperwork away. But I think everyone's first reptile in particular is special because it's almost like the foundations of your reptile obsession. You remember that pure joy and excitement of discovering this animal, of researching it, of saving the money, and then finally being able to get it. And it's been nothing but a privilege to be Gizmo's keeper or gecko parent or whatever you may call it. Also, Gizmo taught me a lot. Like, obviously during this channel when I started it, Gizmo was about 6, and obviously when I'm doing videos I will use, you know, research, published studies and so on to talk about the species, but also I would talk about first-hand experience and observations I'd made. So for example, I always thought it was strange that my female leopard geckos would go off their food spring and summer, and then when Gizmo was about 7 or 8 she finally laid an egg. And I couldn't find a single thing over the internet, in books I read, any mention of a female leopard gecko who hasn't been bred with going off of their food, and this is why. The only thing I could find was gravid females, so females carrying fertile eggs, will go off their food and then lay their eggs and eat again. But this was something that was going on through spring and summer. So throughout my observations of Gizmo, Minnie and Ziggy, I put together a video and all of my findings and concluded they must be ovulating during spring and summer. Like, something must trigger this, and I couldn't find anywhere on the internet about it, so I made it into this video and said, have you noticed the same with your geckos? And so many people were like, wait a minute, yeah, me too, I thought that was just mine. And it was this really lovely moment where we all connected and suddenly understood our animals a lot better. And now if you go on a forum or a Facebook group and ask someone, why is my gecko not eating? And it's between spring and summer and she's a female, almost immediately someone will say, she's probably ovulating. Now, I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I think I made that video like almost a decade ago, and as I said, no one else was talking about this. I couldn't find it anywhere. No official studies, nothing. So I do often wonder how many people originally found that information from that video, from the observations that I made from Gizmo, Minnie and Ziggy. So in a way I hope that maybe Gizmo helped contribute to helping female leopard gecko keepers understand their geckos a little more. I don't know though, like, I don't know, it just kind of makes me proud that even if she's completely unaware of her little leopard gecko fame, it's very nice to think she's helped people in a positive way. Also, she is the face of this channel in a way, because if you've noticed, my sort of profile picture / icon and even my intro thing is based on a picture of Gizmo. So she's kind of everywhere, and I kind of want to keep it that way. I did want to just say a massive thank you to everyone who's left lovely messages. They've honestly brought me to tears. Because the thing is, I didn't realise how many people actually cared. I know that sounds a bit silly, but like, this channel's getting old and it's very niche and it's probably on its way out itself. So to know that people still care, whether they haven't watched in years or whether they still remember Gizmo and they, you know, want to send their condolences, it really meant a lot. And I'm so thankful that I had 18 amazing years with Gizmo, that she seemingly made an impact on maybe some of your lives too. So yeah, and though no doubt the coming weeks and possibly months are going to be difficult, for example, unlearning how to check on that tank every day or feed her as part of my normal routine of feeding all my geckos, it's going to be very strange because, as I said, I have had her over half my life. But I'm going to try to focus on the positive, that I got to do what every keeper hopes to do, and that is to give a reptile a full, happy, healthy and long life.